She was already halfway down the hospital corridor when the nurse stepped in front of her, palm raised, eyes apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not authorized to go in there." The words landed like a slap. The smell of antiseptic burned her nose. Machines beeped behind the glass doors, and she could see him, her husband lying still on the bed, a bandage wrapped around his head. Her heart hammered as she pushed her bag higher on her shoulder and said, "That's my husband." The nurse glanced at the tablet again, then shook her head. "According to our records, you're not listed as his spouse." For a second, the corridor tilted. She laughed, a short sound that didn't belong to her. "That's impossible," she said. "We've been married for 6 years." Security was already approaching. Another nurse murmured, "Legally, ma'am, you're not." The word legally echoed, hollow and cruel, and she felt the floor drop beneath her feet as the guard gently guided her back. Imagine thinking you're happily married, only to find out your husband legally divorced you 3 years ago, and you never knew. Watch Nia's story to see how she uncovers the truth. If you want to see more shocking and emotional stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an update. Her name was Nia Thompson, and until that moment, she had believed her life was ordinary in the best way. She met Junho Park 7 years earlier at a professional conference in Chicago, where his quiet confidence had drawn her in like gravity. He spoke softly, listened carefully, and when he smiled, it felt intentional, as if he didn't waste warmth on just anyone. They dated slowly, deliberately. He brought her home-cooked meals and asked about her childhood. She admired his discipline, the way he planned everything, the way he made the world feel steady. When he proposed, it wasn't flashy, but it was sincere. They married in a small ceremony, her family loud and joyful, his family reserved but polite. She told herself that love didn't need approval from everyone. Marriage meant compromises. When Junho received a job offer in another state, she left behind a promotion she had worked years for. "It's temporary," he said, squeezing her hand. "Once I'm established, we'll rebuild together." She believed him. She always believed him. In their new city, he suggested handling the bills to simplify things. Nia didn't argue. She trusted him. She trusted that the man who held her when she cried would never hurt her. Over time, small things shifted. Important mail disappeared before she saw it. When she asked, he smiled and said, "Nothing important." When she mentioned going back to work, he frowned, saying stress wasn't good for her. "Focus on us," he said. She did. In the hospital waiting area, Nia sat with her hands clasped so tightly her fingers ached. She replayed the nurse's words over and over, certain there had been a mistake. When Junho's brother arrived, his face tightened when he saw her. He nodded stiffly, avoiding her eyes. "They won't let me in," she whispered. "They say I'm not his wife." He hesitated too long. "Maybe you should talk to administration," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Something cold crept up her spine. At the records office, a woman with tired eyes pulled up the file. Her fingers paused. "Ms. Thompson," she said gently, "according to this, the divorce was finalized 3 years ago." The room went silent. Nia felt her lungs refuse to work. "No," she said, "that's wrong. I never divorced my husband." The woman turned the screen slightly. Dates, signatures, a judge's stamp. "Papers were served," she continued. "Address on file." Nia leaned forward, heart pounding. It wasn't her address. It had never been her address. Her name appeared at the bottom, a signature that looked like hers but wasn't. "This isn't real," Nia whispered. The woman's sympathy was unbearable. "I'm sorry." She walked outside into the cold, her phone trembling in her hand. She called Junho. Voicemail. She called again. Nothing. Her mind spiraled backward, counting anniversaries that suddenly meant nothing, memories cracking and splintering. 3 years. That meant every holiday, every shared bed, every whispered promise had happened after he had already erased her. Rage flared, sharp and blinding, followed by humiliation so deep it made her nauseous. She thought of how she had defended him when friends asked questions, how she had blamed herself for feeling lonely. Her hands shook as she searched his email on her phone, passwords she knew because she had trusted him. Buried messages surfaced, legal correspondence, wire transfers, names she didn't recognize. That night when Junho finally called, his voice was calm, too calm. "You shouldn't be at the hospital," he said. "We'll talk later." Her chest burned. "Talk about what?" she demanded. "The part where you divorced me in secret." Silence stretched. When he spoke again, it was careful. "It was complicated." She laughed, a broken sound. "You stole 3 years of my life," she said. "You let me believe I was your wife." he exhaled. Nothing changed between us, he replied. We were still together. The words sliced through her. Paperwork doesn't erase love, he added. Nia closed her eyes, tears spilling over. In that moment, something inside her hardened, a quiet resolve forming beneath the pain. She didn't know how yet, but she knew one thing with terrifying clarity: she would never let him decide her reality again. She sat in her car long after the call ended, headlights cutting through the dark, chest rising and falling as shock gave way to fury. Images flooded her mind. Him opening mail, redirecting calls, smiling while lying. She realized the cruelty wasn't the divorce alone. It was the performance, the daily deception that required planning and patience. When dawn crept in, she wiped her face and drove home, noticing for the first time how little of the space felt like hers. Drawers were locked. Files were missing. A drawer held photocopies of passports, unfamiliar names circled in ink. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't an accident. It was a system, and she was done being its quiet casualty. She straightened her shoulders, breathing deeply, and whispered a promise to herself. This truth would be the beginning, not end. Nia barely slept that night. When morning came, it arrived with a crushing weight, as if the truth had settled into her bones. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the mug of coffee growing cold between her palms, replaying the call again and again. Nothing changed between us. The audacity of it made her jaw clench. Everything had changed. The ground beneath her marriage had been hollowed out, and she had been walking on it, smiling, believing. She began opening drawers he had always kept locked. One held neatly labeled folders, legal letters, bank statements. She scanned dates, her pulse quickening. 3 years ago, a new account had been opened in his name only. Another folder contained copies of her ID, scanned and filed. A chill slid down her spine. He hadn't just divorced her, he had planned for it. She found emails printed and tucked away, communications with a lawyer she had never heard of, discussing service by alternative address, waivers, procedural shortcuts. Her name appeared again and again, reduced to ink and convenience. Her phone buzzed. It was her friend Mariah. "You okay?" Mariah asked, voice cautious. Nia hesitated, then the words tumbled out in a rush. "He divorced me 3 years ago, I didn't know." Silence crackled. "What?" Mariah breathed. "That's not possible." Nia swallowed. "It is, I saw the papers." Mariah's anger was immediate. "Where is he?" "At the hospital," Nia replied. "And I'm not allowed in." The reality of that sentence hit her anew, and she pressed her lips together to steady herself. By afternoon, she was sitting in a lawyer's office, knees bouncing, eyes darting to the framed certificates on the wall. The attorney, a woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, listened without interruption. When Nia finished, she slid the documents across the desk. The lawyer leaned forward, scanning. "This doesn't look clean," she said finally. "Service to an address you never lived at, questionable signatures. There's potential fraud here." Relief and rage collided in Nia's chest. "So I'm not crazy," she said. The lawyer shook her head. "No, and if he continued to present himself as married to you while benefiting financially, there may be more." That evening, Junho came home. He moved carefully, as if entering a room with broken glass. "We need to talk," he said. Nia stood by the window, arms crossed. "You mean you need to explain," she replied. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I didn't want to hurt you." She laughed, the sound sharp. "You divorced me in secret," she said. "You let me call you my husband." He looked away. "It was pressure," he said quietly. "My family, expectations, it was easier to separate things legally." She turned to face him, eyes blazing. "Separate me," she said, "from my own life." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I still took care of you," he said. "You were safe." Her hands curled into fists. "You controlled everything," she shot back. "Money, information, my choices." He frowned. "You're exaggerating." That word, exaggerating, ignited something feral. "You forged my signature," she said. "You lied to my face for years." He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something like fear. Days blurred together as Nia dug deeper. She discovered he had changed beneficiaries on accounts, listed himself as single on official forms, quietly rerouted assets. Each discovery felt like another betrayal, stacking higher until she wondered how she hadn't seen it sooner. She called his brother. "Did you know?" she asked, voice shaking. There was a pause. "It wasn't my place," he replied. The words hollowed her out. She hung up without responding. At the hospital, Junho recovered quickly. When he was discharged, he avoided her eyes, moving through the house like a stranger. Nia watched him pack a bag one night. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To stay with my cousin," he said. "You need space." She scoffed. "You decided that too." He flinched but didn't answer. When the door closed behind him, the silence felt different, heavy, but also strangely clean. The lawyer called with updates. "We can file to challenge the divorce," she said, "and pursue damages." Nia nodded, gripping the phone. "Do it," she said. The process was grueling. Depositions, documents. Each step forced her to relive the humiliation, but with every truth dragged into the light, she felt steadier. She spoke to a financial investigator who traced funds she had never known existed. "He benefited significantly," the investigator said, "by misrepresenting your marital status." Nia closed her eyes, breathing through the anger. This wasn't just about her heartbreak anymore. It was about accountability. Junho tried calling late at night. She stopped answering. When he texted apologies, she read them once and deleted them. He showed up unannounced one afternoon, eyes tired. "I never meant to erase you," he said. Nia met his gaze. "You did," she replied. "Every day you chose not to tell me." He reached for her hand. She stepped back. "We were still together," he insisted softly. She shook her head. "You don't get to redefine reality," she said. "Not anymore." As weeks passed, the story widened. Friends asked questions. His family went silent. Nia learned he had remarried overseas on paper at least shortly after the divorce. The confirmation hit like ice water. She sat on her bed, staring at the email, feeling the final piece click into place. She hadn't been confused, she had been used. A placeholder, a convenience. The grief came in waves, but beneath it was something new, clarity. She wiped her face, stood, and began packing his remaining things into boxes. Each item placed away felt like reclaiming a small part of herself. On the day the filing went through, Nia walked out of the courthouse into sunlight that felt brighter than it had in years. The fight wasn't over, but she had chosen it. She took a deep breath, shoulders back, and stepped forward, ready to confront whatever came next, not as someone erased, but as someone awake. Nia's phone buzzed constantly over the next few days, a relentless reminder that the man she had called her husband had built an entire hidden life without her knowledge. Calls from unknown numbers, legal notifications, emails, all tied to decisions made without her consent. She sat at the dining table, papers strewn around her like fragments of a life she thought she understood. The divorce had been filed under a technicality, but the ramifications were deep. Financial assets, property rights, tax documents, even health insurance coverage. Every folder she opened revealed new betrayals, each one cutting sharper than the last. She closed her eyes, hands trembling, and tried to remember the man she had loved. Was he even real, or had she only loved the illusion he allowed her to see? The first confrontation was unbearable. She stood in the middle of their living room, holding up a stack of papers, her voice raw. "Do you know what this is?" she demanded. Junho's calm exterior cracked just slightly, a shadow of unease in his eyes. "It's paperwork," he said. His voice, usually so measured, wavered. "Divorce finalized 3 years ago. You never received notice." She cut him off. "You divorced me without telling me, without a word, and you lived with me as if nothing happened." The silence that followed was thick, charged with years of deceit. "It was complicated," he said finally. "I didn't want to hurt you." Nia laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and broken. "Hurt me, you erased my life." She began methodically retracing the steps of his deception. Every bank statement, every insurance form, every correspondence revealed the extent of the manipulation. He had rerouted bills, redirected mail, and quietly altered joint accounts. He had maintained appearances, ensuring that she remained unaware while he maneuvered legally behind her back. Nia's hands shook as she confronted the scale of his actions, realizing the deliberate intent behind every decision he had made. Rage mingled with disbelief, creating a storm she could hardly contain. How had she missed the subtle signs, the dismissive comments, the secretive calls, the unexplained absences? It all coalesced into a tapestry of lies. Her friends noticed a change in her. Mariah, concerned, asked, "Have you confronted him yet?" Nia shook her head. "I don't know if I want to talk to him or destroy everything he's ever touched," she said bitterly. But she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. She arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe where neither of them had to pretend. When he arrived, the casual smile he offered felt like a mask over a familiar stranger. "Nia," he began, voice tentative. "We need to discuss this calmly." She cut him off. Calmly, you divorced me 3 years ago in secret and now you want calm. His gaze faltered, but he tried to maintain control. I still care about you. Nothing changed between us. That line was the final insult. Nia's hands curled into fists. Nothing changed. You built a life that erased mine. She started taking action. The lawyer's office became a second home, her mornings consumed by meetings, calls, and document review. The divorce was challengeable due to procedural errors, and she had a strong case for financial restitution. Investigators traced assets and uncovered evidence of deliberate misrepresentation. Each step, while emotionally taxing, empowered her. She could finally see a path to reclaiming what had been taken. Nia's anger transformed into determination, a quiet, focused energy that made her steps deliberate, her voice firm when speaking to anyone involved in the case. Meanwhile, Junho attempted to communicate, sending messages that alternated between apologetic and pleading. Nia stopped answering. She could no longer tolerate his manipulation. She realized that any response would give him control over her emotions again. She documented everything, preparing for a confrontation that was no longer about seeking explanation, but asserting her rights. When he showed up at her apartment unannounced one evening, she met him at the door, calm but resolute. I don't want to hear excuses, she said. I want accountability. His face paled slightly, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she had once loved, now replaced by the man who had calculated her erasure. As the legal proceedings moved forward, the tension escalated. Every court appearance, every deposition forced Nia to relive the betrayal, but she met each challenge with composure. The courtroom became a stage where she reclaimed her narrative, presenting evidence that highlighted not only the legal breach, but the emotional manipulation she had endured. Friends and family attended sessions, witnessing her transformation from a woman blindsided by deceit to someone assertive, confident, and unyielding. Each document she filed, each testimony she delivered, chipped away at the power Junho had held over her life. In quieter moments, she reflected on the years lost. She mourned the holidays spent believing in a life that had existed only in his narrative. The late-night conversations, the shared plans, the laughter, all tinged with the bitter realization that she had been living alongside a stranger. Yet within that mourning was the seed of resilience. Nia recognized that reclaiming her life was not merely about legal victory, but about reclaiming her identity, her autonomy, and her sense of self-worth. She began journaling again, documenting each day, each feeling, each step toward freedom. Junho attempted to negotiate privately, offering settlements and promises of reconciliation. Nia declined. The betrayal was too deep for platitudes. She understood that real closure required action and accountability, not empty words. The lawyer advised her to maintain firm boundaries. Emotionally, you need space, the lawyer said. Legally, you need documentation. You've done both. Nia nodded, feeling a quiet sense of pride. For the first time in years, she felt in control. The day came when she faced Junho one final time outside the courthouse. He approached cautiously. Nia, She stopped him with a raised hand. I'm done listening. I've seen the papers, traced the accounts, spoken to the witnesses. I am reclaiming my life. There's nothing left for us. His eyes widened, perhaps with disbelief, perhaps with regret. She didn't care. The air felt lighter as she walked past him. A woman who had endured manipulation, exposure, and heartbreak, now moving with purpose and clarity. Nia walked out of the courthouse into the cold afternoon air, the sun cutting through the clouds as if offering some kind of quiet acknowledgement. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight that had pressed on her chest for years begin to lift. Every step away from that building felt like reclaiming a piece of herself, her identity, her autonomy, her dignity. The legal victory was significant, but what mattered most was the understanding that she had survived a betrayal so meticulous, and prolonged it had threatened to erase her entirely. Her apartment felt different now, too. She spent hours sorting through belongings, deciding what stayed and what went, turning over boxes she hadn't touched in years. She found photographs of trips she thought had been shared with love. She held them, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and bitterness. Each picture, each memento, became a reminder of her resilience, a testament to her ability to endure and to reclaim. The man who had sought to manipulate her had left her in his wake. but she would not let the shadows he cast define her. Calls from friends and family poured in after news of the divorce became public. Mariah was one of the first. "You're incredible, Nia," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can't believe what you went through and how strong you are." Nia laughed softly, a sound lighter than it had been in years. I refuse to stay erased," she said. Sharing her story became a way to process, to turn pain into a narrative that empowered her rather than trapped her in victimhood. Messages from colleagues, acquaintances, and even strangers arrived, each one affirming the same sentiment. She had endured what many couldn't even imagine, and she had emerged whole. Junho, meanwhile, was largely absent from her life, a presence felt more than seen. There were brief attempts, calls, texts, but Nia didn't respond. Each message was a reminder of the past, a thread that could pull her back into the spiral of betrayal and doubt. She realized that the closure she needed wasn't in explanations or apologies. It was in her actions, in the boundaries she set, in the life she reclaimed. She focused instead on her career, reconnecting with friends, and exploring passions that had been sidelined during the years she had been consumed by the deception. One evening, as she walked through a local park, the breeze cool against her skin, Nia reflected on the person she had been and the person she had become. There had been fear, confusion, humiliation, but also courage. She had faced the impossible, navigated treachery that had been invisible to everyone but herself, and had taken decisive action to reclaim her life. She realized that the betrayal, as painful as it had been, had forced her to confront her own strength, her own instincts, and her own capacity for resilience. The process of healing was neither linear nor swift. Nights came when memories resurfaced, and anger flared like wildfire. Yet, Nia found ways to channel these emotions constructively, writing in her journal, meditating, running along the riverbank, and speaking openly with her therapist. She learned that vulnerability was not weakness. It was a bridge to clarity and growth. She embraced this understanding, allowing herself to grieve fully while also embracing the possibility of joy, independence, and self-determination. As weeks turned into months, Nia's life regained rhythm. She signed leases for new spaces, cultivated relationships, and returned to work with renewed focus. Her narrative had shifted from one of victimhood to empowerment. She could reflect on the past without being consumed by it. Each day, each choice she made, reinforced her agency and reminded her that she was no longer at the mercy of someone else's manipulation. She was the author of her own story. In private moments, she allowed herself to think about Junho, not with longing but with recognition. He had been a part of her life, a chapter, not the whole book. She acknowledged the hurt, the deceit, and the anger, but she refused to let it dictate her future. Instead, she focused on rebuilding trust in herself, in her judgment, and in her ability to navigate relationships with discernment. The empowerment she felt was subtle but persistent, a quiet strength that informed every decision she made. By the time the legal matters concluded, Nia felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of closure. The divorce had been contested successfully, assets were rightfully reassigned, and the deceptive actions were officially recognized. Yet, the true victory was personal. She had reclaimed her narrative, confronted betrayal with courage, and emerged with a clear sense of identity and purpose. In every document signed, every confrontation faced, and every decision made, Nia had established boundaries that could not be ignored or violated. She had learned that reclaiming oneself was the ultimate form of justice. The days that followed were filled with small victories and quiet moments of reflection. She allowed herself to plan for the future, to dream without hesitation or fear. Vacations, personal projects, and even the possibility of love on her terms became tangible and real. The years of manipulation had left scars, but they also left lessons and a deep reservoir of inner strength. Nia moved forward with intention, refusing to allow the past to overshadow the potential of what lay ahead. Each step was deliberate, each choice affirming her autonomy and resilience. The next morning, Nia woke to sunlight spilling across her bedroom floor. The soft light contrasted sharply with the storm she had weathered over the past weeks, yet it also carried a promise, a signal that the world continued, indifferent to betrayal but full of possibility. She stretched, feeling the tension in her shoulders gradually loosen. The legal victories were behind her, yet the emotional journey was ongoing. For the first time in years, she felt the luxury of deciding her own day, her own path, without consulting anyone else or fearing hidden agendas. She brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the city awaken. Each car, each passerby, felt ordinary yet symbolic, a world she could navigate on her own terms. Her phone buzzed, but for once she ignored it. Messages from Junho, tentative and apologetic, had lost their power over her. She no longer needed validation or explanation. Instead, she focused on rebuilding connections that had frayed during her marriage, the friends she had drifted from, the colleagues she had pushed aside, and even family members she hadn't spoken to in months. Mariah came over that afternoon, bringing a bag of groceries and a warm smile. "I've missed this," Mariah said, as they unpacked food and shared laughter that hadn't felt so light in years. Nia felt the simple joy of connection, unburdened by the weight of secrets or betrayal. In the following days, she began reorganizing her home, turning the spaces that had once felt suffocating into environments that reflected her independence. She found herself lingering over small choices: the placement of a lamp, the color of curtains, even the music she played. Each decision reinforced her autonomy, a quiet rebellion against the years she had been controlled and misled. She revisited her journals, reading old entries filled with hope, disappointment, and dreams. It struck her how much she had grown, how much stronger she had become, and how resilient her spirit was in the face of deliberate deception. One afternoon, while sorting through a drawer, she found a folder labeled with Junho's handwriting. Inside were letters, financial statements, and photocopies of documents she hadn't seen before. Curiosity mingled with caution as she flipped through them. They painted a picture of meticulous planning, alternate addresses, legal maneuvers, and ongoing financial manipulation. Her stomach churned at the realization of the depth of his deceit. Yet instead of despair, a wave of determination washed over her. These papers were no longer a trap. They were evidence of her resilience and proof that she had reclaimed control over her life. She also began to address the emotional wounds left behind. Therapy sessions became a sanctuary, a place to process anger, betrayal, and grief. The therapist guided her in transforming the pain into strength, teaching her to recognize the patterns of manipulation and how to set boundaries for herself and others. Nia realized that understanding her own worth and limits was as critical as any legal action. The betrayal had taught her vigilance, discernment, and the value of self-trust. She carried these lessons into every interaction, every decision, ensuring that her past could not repeat itself. One evening, while walking along the river, Nia reflected on how far she had come. The water's steady flow mirrored her own progress, forward, persistent, unstoppable. She thought about the years she had lost, but also about the lessons she had gained. The anger still flared occasionally, but it was now tempered with clarity. She had faced the unimaginable, confronted betrayal, and emerged with a stronger sense of self. Her steps along the riverbank were firm, deliberate, a physical manifestation of her emotional reclamation. The turning point came when she received news that Junho had quietly attempted to reverse some of the legal decisions he had lost. The lawyer advised caution, but also emphasized that Nia had the upper hand. She felt a surge of confidence. She drafted her responses carefully, measured, and unyielding. For the first time, she realized that she wasn't just reacting. She was proactively shaping her future. The balance of power had shifted entirely. No longer subject to manipulation, she held authority over her narrative, her possessions, and her emotional well-being. As the weeks turned into months, Nia noticed a transformation in her social and professional life. She re-engaged with colleagues, taking on projects she had shelved during her years of uncertainty. She nurtured friendships with those who had stood by her and even reconnected with family members who had been distant. The network she rebuilt was based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect, reflecting the values she now held paramount. The betrayal she endured had strengthened her ability to recognize genuine connection and reinforced her commitment to nurturing relationships that honored her. By the time the legal processes were fully concluded, Nia had not only secured justice, but also established a framework for her future. She had reclaimed her finances, her home, and her autonomy. More importantly, she had reclaimed herself, her confidence, her intuition, and her sense of agency. Every document filed, every court appearance, every confrontation she had navigated contributed to a profound internal shift. She understood now that empowerment wasn't just about external victories. It was about claiming her identity, standing firm in her truth, and refusing to allow anyone to dictate her worth. Months later, Nia found herself in a quiet cafe, sipping tea as sunlight filtered through the windows. The serenity of the moment was deliberate, a way to mark how far she had come. Around her, people moved through their lives, absorbed in conversations, laptops, and books. She observed them without judgment, simply appreciating the rhythm of ordinary life. It struck her that for years, she had been denied this kind of normalcy. Her past had been dominated by secrecy, manipulation, and betrayal, and yet now she could participate in life fully, on her own terms. Each breath felt lighter, each heartbeat more attuned to her own rhythm, rather than the invisible strings Junho had once pulled. Her mornings became routines of intention, journaling, exercise, and work that she pursued with renewed vigor. The anger that once consumed her had transformed into focus. Every decision was deliberate, calculated to reinforce the boundaries she had fought so hard to establish. Friends commented on the change. They noticed the poise in her walk, the clarity in her speech, the confidence in her eyes. Mariah teased gently, "I don't even recognize you," in a good way. Nia smiled, recognizing the truth behind the observation. She was no longer merely surviving, she was thriving. One afternoon, she received a notice from Junho. He had attempted to contact mutual acquaintances, subtly attempting to influence outcomes related to their shared history. Nia read the message calmly, her hand steady. The urge to respond, to defend herself, rose for a brief moment, but she caught it and let it pass. She realized she no longer needed to engage to assert her agency. Her life, her choices, and her peace were hers to command. She contacted her lawyer briefly to confirm that no further action was necessary, and then she deleted the email. The control he once wielded was gone. Her silence was now her power. In private moments, Nia allowed herself reflection, honest contemplation of the life she had been given and the life she had chosen to reclaim. She thought of the years lost, the love betrayed, and the manipulation endured. Tears came occasionally, not from weakness, but from the recognition of what she had endured and the strength it took to move forward. She realized that healing was not linear. It had peaks and valleys, moments of clarity and moments of doubt. Yet every step forward was proof of her resilience, her intelligence, and her unwavering commitment to herself. Socially, Nia began engaging in spaces that had previously felt closed or intimidating. She joined professional networks, attended events she had once deferred, and reconnected with communities she had neglected. In every interaction, she carried herself differently, aware of her worth, unafraid to assert boundaries, and capable of discerning authenticity in others. Her charisma, once quiet and understated, now radiated from a place of inner security. People responded. Doors that had once seemed closed opened. Opportunities that had been missed were now visible and attainable. Nia embraced them with the same determination she had applied to reclaiming her life. Her personal relationships evolved, too. She found herself gravitating toward friendships and connections that were reciprocal, honest, and affirming. Casual acquaintances who had witnessed her growth remarked on the transformation, some inspired, others curious. She became a figure of quiet strength, someone who had endured extraordinary deception and emerged not broken, but whole. The shadow of betrayal no longer dictated her interactions. Instead, it informed her discernment, her empathy, and her capacity for meaningful engagement. Evenings were often her time for introspection, walking along familiar streets, feeling the pulse of the city beneath her feet. She thought about Junho, not with longing, but with recognition of the lessons embedded in the betrayal. Each reflection reinforced her commitment to autonomy, vigilance, and self-respect. She acknowledged the hurt, accepted it, and chose to carry only what empowered her. She had learned that freedom was not just the absence of manipulation, but the presence of clarity, agency, and deliberate choice. The culmination of her journey was subtle but profound. In her apartment, which now fully reflected her tastes, preferences, and choices, Nia paused to observe her surroundings. Every piece of furniture, every book, every photograph was a testament to her reclaimed identity. She realized that while the betrayal had attempted to define her, she had refused. She was no longer subject to another's narrative. She was the author of her own story, deliberate and unyielding, capable of shaping the future with intention and grace. The liberation she felt was deep, enduring, and fully deserved. Nia stood at the edge of the river one evening, the water reflecting the fading sunset in soft ripples. The scene was tranquil, almost serene, but within her, a quiet storm of reflection still churned. She thought of the man who had once defined so much of her life, who had orchestrated a betrayal so meticulous it had taken months for her to fully untangle. The anger that had once consumed her had softened, replaced by clarity and purpose. She realized that while the past could not be changed, it could inform her choices, fortify her boundaries, and deepen her understanding of herself. For the first time, she felt fully in control of her story. Her phone buzzed, another message from Junho, but she didn't open it. Instead, she let it remain unread, a reminder that she no longer needed to validate or justify herself to anyone who had already violated her trust. She had discovered that power lay not in confrontation, but in self-possession. Each day, she curated her life with intentionality. Work she loved, friendships that nourished, spaces that reflected her tastes and desires. The woman who had once been blindsided by deceit now moved through the world with confidence and decisiveness, a living testament to resilience. She began writing again, filling journals with reflections, lessons learned, and visions for the future. Her words captured the intensity of her experiences, the betrayal, the anger, the grief, but also the empowerment that emerged in its wake. She crafted narratives not for others' approval, but for her own understanding, each page a step towards cementing her identity independent of those who had sought to manipulate her. In sharing her story with close friends, she found catharsis. The act of articulation transformed the trauma into wisdom and strength. Each conversation reaffirmed her agency and her capacity to navigate the world on her own terms. Weeks turned into months, and Nia noticed subtle but powerful shifts in herself. She no longer second-guessed her instincts or deferred to the expectations of others. Decisions that once felt heavy or fraught now carried clarity and purpose. Opportunities in her career, personal life, and social circles were approached with discernment, ensuring that her energy was invested only in what aligned with her values. Even casual interactions reflected this newfound authority. She spoke with conviction, listened without compromise, and prioritized relationships that honored her worth. On quiet nights, she allowed herself moments of gratitude and reflection. The betrayal, as painful as it had been, had revealed depths of strength and insight she might never have discovered otherwise. She recognized the courage it had taken to confront deceit, to navigate legal and emotional challenges, and to reclaim autonomy over her life. The scars of the experience were present, but they no longer dictated her movements. They were reminders of survival and transformation. Each scar marked a lesson learned, a boundary reinforced, and a victory claimed. One evening, Nia received an unexpected message from a distant cousin. It was brief but filled with warmth. "I've heard your story. I admire your strength." She paused, reflecting on how far she had come from the woman who had once been denied access to her own life. The message reminded her that the world could recognize integrity and resilience, even when betrayal had obscured it. Nia smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction that no apology from Junho could ever replicate. She had emerged whole, uncompromised, and fiercely self-aware. Standing once again at the river, she let the cool breeze brush against her skin, closing her eyes for a moment. The past was a series of events she could now observe without being pulled into its currents. She had faced manipulation, deceit, and betrayal, and in doing so had unearthed her own strength, discernment, and agency. The horizon stretched before her, vast and open, a symbol of the life she would continue to build, one defined by her choices, her boundaries, and her unwavering sense of self. With a deep exhale, Nia whispered to the empty air, a declaration more for herself than anyone else. "He erased me on paper, but I rewrote my life in reality." And with that, she turned from the river, stepping into the future she had always deserved, a woman empowered, whole, and free.